Deep in New Mexico's White Sands National Park, preserved in ancient mud, lie footprints that could rewrite human history. They capture the steps of children playing, adults walking, perhaps even someone slipping in the wet earth. For over a decade, these tracks have been at the center of one of archaeology's most heated debates. In 2021, scientists claimed they were 23,000 years old, 10,000 years older than the accepted timeline for humans in America. Other scientists said they were wrong. The dating methods were flawed. The evidence was questionable. But in 2025, a team of researchers returned to White Sands with one goal: to settle this debate once and for all. And what they found would finally end the controversy. The story begins in 2009, when park rangers at White Sands National Park noticed unusual impressions near Alkali Flat, a dry lake bed within the park. At first, they thought these might be animal tracks, perhaps left by mammoths or giant ground sloths that roamed the Ice Age landscape. But as researchers studied these impressions more closely, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary: human footprints. Not just a few, but dozens of them, perfectly preserved in what was once wet clay. Some showed the clear outline of toes. Others revealed the arch of a foot. A few even captured someone slipping in the mud. These were snapshots of real people who walked this land thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt were built. To understand why this discovery sparked such a fierce battle, you need to know what archaeologists believed for nearly a century. The standard story went like this. Around 13,000 years ago, the first humans reached North America by walking across a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. As massive ice sheets covering Canada began to melt, a corridor opened between them. Through this narrow passage, groups of hunter-gatherers traveled south, bringing with them a distinctive technology: stone spear points with a characteristic fluted design. These people were called the Clovis culture, named after the New Mexico town where their artifacts were first discovered in the 1930s. For generations, this was taught as fact. Clovis first. No humans in America before 13,000 years ago. The debate was over, but those footprints at White Sands were about to blow that theory apart. In 2019, a team from Bournemouth University, working with the National Park Service, excavated the site. What they found was stunning: 61 footprints spread across 7 different soil layers, suggesting repeated visits over thousands of years. And scattered among the human tracks were the footprints of Ice Age giants, Columbian mammoths, giant ground sloths, dire wolves, American lions, an entire lost world frozen in time. The question was, how old were they? In September 2021, researchers led by Matthew Bennett published their answer, and it sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. They used radiocarbon dating on seeds of an aquatic plant called Rupia serosa, found embedded in the same mud layers as the footprints. The results came back shocking: 21,000 to 23,000 years old. If this was true, humans were in America 10,000 years before the Clovis people even existed. The ice-free corridor theory was wrong. Everything we thought we knew about the first Americans needed to be rewritten. The response was immediate and brutal. Within months, critics published a formal rebuttal. The problem, they argued, was the dating material itself. Rupia serosa is an aquatic plant. It grows underwater, and water can contain what's called old carbon, ancient carbon atoms dissolved from rocks and sediments that make organic material appear older than it actually is. The critics were clear. The seeds might have absorbed old carbon from the lake water, making the footprints appear thousands of years older than they really were. Without independent confirmation using different materials, the 23,000-year date couldn't be trusted. The footprints might be real, but the age? That was still up for debate. But here's what most people don't know. The White Sands team saw this criticism coming. Even as their original paper was being published, they were already working on round 2. They knew they needed different materials that couldn't be contaminated by old carbon. And in October 2023, they struck back. This time, they analyzed pollen grains from terrestrial plants, species that grew on land and absorbed carbon from the atmosphere, not from lake water. These pollen grains were found in the exact same layers as the footprints. They also used a completely different technique called optically stimulated luminescence, which dates when minerals in the sediment were last exposed to sunlight. Both methods confirm the same timeline, 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. Two independent lines of evidence, two different dating methods, same answer. You'd think that would settle it. But the skeptics weren't done. Some scientists argued that even terrestrial pollen could be affected by factors we don't fully understand. Others demanded independent laboratories, teams that had nothing to do with the original researchers, verify the results. The controversy was far from over, and that's when Vance Holliday decided to end this debate once and for all. Holliday is a geologist and archaeologist from the University of Arizona who had been studying the peopling of the Americas for nearly 50 years. He'd seen debates like this before, scientific battles where both sides dig in and refuse to budge. But he also knew how to resolve them. You need independent verification, you need different materials, and you need laboratories with no stake in the outcome. So in 2022 and 2023, Holliday's team returned to White Sands with a plan. They would date the one thing no one had tested yet, the ancient mud itself. They extracted core samples from the Paleolake beds, long tubes of earth drilled from the site that captured the entire geological history of the area, not just the surface where the footprints were found, but the layers above and below, creating a complete timeline of the ancient lake. They sent these samples to two completely independent laboratories, neither of which had been involved in the earlier studies. No bias, no preconceptions, just raw data. And in June 2025, those results came back. The mud was between 20,700 and 22,400 years old. This was the moment everything changed. Now there were three different materials, all dated independently. Seeds from aquatic plants, pollen from land plants, ancient mud from the lake bed. Three completely different substances, three different dating techniques, multiple independent laboratories, and every single one of them converged on the same time period, 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. In total, 55 radiocarbon dates, all pointing to the same answer. As Holliday put it in his paper, it would be serendipity in the extreme, to have all these dates giving you a consistent picture that's in error. The odds of 55 independent tests all being wrong in the exact same way? Astronomically low. The debate was over. The footprints had been dated, finally, definitively. Beyond reasonable doubt. Humans were walking through New Mexico 23,000 years ago, during the peak of the last ice age. And that changes everything we thought we knew about how people first reached America. Because if people were here 23,000 years ago, they couldn't have come through the ice-free corridor. That corridor didn't exist yet. The ice sheets covering Canada were still at their maximum extent, more than a mile thick in places. There was no passage through, which means these people arrived by a completely different route. The most likely explanation is what researchers call the kelp highway hypothesis. During the last glacial maximum, while inland routes were blocked by ice, the Pacific coastline remained open. Kelp forests stretched for thousands of miles along the shore, creating an ecosystem rich with fish, seals, sea otters, and shellfish. For maritime people with boats, this wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. They could have island-hopped south from Beringia, the now submerged landmass that connected Siberia and Alaska, following the abundance until they reached the rivers flowing inland. But who were these people who left their footprints in the mud? The tracks themselves offer clues. Most of them, interestingly, were made by teenagers and children. Only a few large adult prints were found. One explanation is that young people were assigned tasks, like fetching water and gathering plants near the muddy shoreline, while adults worked elsewhere. Some tracks show someone stepping carefully, perhaps stalking prey. Others show children running and playing. One set of prints appears to document human hunters tracking a giant sloth. You can see where the sloth stood on its hind legs and spun around, possibly showing fear. We don't know if the hunt was successful, but we know these people weren't just surviving, they were living. They were raising children. They were hunting Ice Age megafauna that would be extinct within a few thousand years. This discovery doesn't just change when humans arrived in America. It changes our understanding of who they were. These weren't desperate refugees stumbling through an ice corridor into an empty continent. These were skilled mariners who navigated thousands of miles of coastline. They were sophisticated enough to track and hunt animals that towered over them. They were organized enough to return to the same camps generation after generation. The footprints span 7 different layers, representing approximately 2,000 years of repeated occupation. This was a place they knew, a place they trusted, a place worth returning to. And they did all of this during the coldest chapter of the last ice age, when survival demanded not just strength, but ingenuity, planning, and deep knowledge of the landscape. The White Sands footprints are part of a broader revolution sweeping through American archaeology. Other sites are pushing back the timeline even further. In Texas, stone tools dated to 15,000 years ago. In Idaho, evidence of coastal migration reaching inland river systems 16,000 years ago. In Chile, the Monte Verde site shows humans using seaweed and building wooden structures 14,000 years ago. Together, these discoveries are painting a new picture of the first Americans, a story of exploration, adaptation, and maritime skill that began thousands of years earlier than we ever imagined. With 55 radiocarbon dates from 3 different materials, analyzed by multiple independent laboratories, all converging on the same answer, the case is closed. The footprints are 21,000 to 23,000 years old. The Clovis first theory is dead. The ice-free corridor wasn't the pathway, and humans were in America during the last glacial maximum, walking beside mammoths and giant sloths in a world we're only beginning to understand. After 4 years of scientific battle, the footprints have been dated. Finally, the story of how we got here is being rewritten, one footprint at a time. So what do you think? Were these first Americans skilled mariners who navigated the Pacific coast? Or could there be another route we haven't discovered yet? Let us know in the comments. Till the next video, this is Lost Evidence.